world can feel chaotic and out of balance. Can anyone relate? Our kids need new tools to navigate the changes they face in their lives on a daily basis. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. We can't count on anyone else. We have to be the warriors for our kids. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that we are partners with schools and the leaders in our communities. So join us as we use the science of the educational process known as social emotional learning. We use other proven mind-body techniques as well to create a collection of exercises and tools for kids of all ages.
In today's episode, we'll talk to Professor Yuli Legakis, a psychology professor at Folsom Lake College, who will explain what she's seeing in today's college students and also what's going on in their brains. And just a warning, this episode, we're going to really talk about suicide and everything that goes with it. So please do take care of yourself. And as you listen, feel free to pause and give yourself a moment to take a break if it's just feeling overwhelming. The whole point is we do need to talk about it, but please do take care of yourself.
Let's dig in. I am super excited today. We get to have Yuli Legakis. She's a local professor at Folsom Lake College. And Marci and Yuli and I have all been friends for a long time. Yuli is on our board at Core Experience. And we, in fact, started this company around a book club that Yuli was teaching for us around Brene Brown's book, right? Rising Strong. And there was a lot of powerful women. And as a result of that, we have a company, we have a nonprofit organization, and now we're doing the Warrior Parent Podcast. So Yuli, we're super excited. This is going to be playful and fun because we have so much to talk about. But really our reason for having you here is, for a couple of reasons. We could go over a lot of topics, but I think you allow us to see some perspective on the world of educators and where the kids are coming from now versus where they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. So we're hoping that you're going to help enlighten our parents who are listening to the podcast to give them some perspective. So anyway, just give us a little background about yourself, and then we'll get into some of the bigger details.
Okay, so thanks for having me. This is really exciting. Been looking forward to this. So, I am a parent. I have 3 kids. I have twin girls who are 22 and my son is 18. And so, I've lived this as a parent, but also as an instructor. I teach psychology at the college near here. And to see the shift and change in the last 18 years that I've been teaching has been fascinating. And, there have been some good and some sad things that I've been witness to, not only again as a parent, but also as an instructor. And I will tell you the biggest thing that I just finished the semester. Today is, final grades are due today, so that'll be fun. But the point that I'm seeing is kind of like this deer in the headlights look that these kids have, because I'm not the kind of instructor that sits there and lectures. I like to engage the kids in conversation. Yeah. And so we ask and get into some provocative topics, and they do. They have this like, holy, I have no idea what I'm going to do. No idea. Yeah. It's really kind of sad.
Yeah.
And scary.
Yeah. So has your curriculum changed throughout the years in these 20 years that you've been teaching psychology? I mean, we have learned so much about our brains in the last 20 years, right? We've come a long way. So talk about that a little bit. Like, first of all, how do you teach differently than you did 20 years ago? What's going on in the school itself?
So, when I first started teaching, I was a new teacher, and I kind of stuck to the curriculum a little more than I do now. And kids came in with more capacity for attention. You know, they were able to sit with and listen to and engage with, you know, lecture formats. They were able to just resonate with that format. And now I think social media, so many shifts and changes in our society. COVID has done some things. We're going to be unraveling the impacts of COVID for a long time.
Yes.
So I really believe that those aspects, and, you know, and my teaching style has changed. I feel like, you know, it used to be about the rigor and like you have to know the brain structures and what happens here and what happens there. And, you know, what do drugs do to the brain and so on. And now more about, hey, so how can we use psychology? How can we apply it? And so my emphasis as a professor has changed and shifted, but I think it's as a response to how these kids are coming into the classroom these days. You know, social media, definitely a lot of internal and external pressures on these kids.
Yeah.
The financial aspects of, you know, our current recession on them and trying to figure out the future. Really, they're struggling. And so I want to engage. I want to give them tools. I don't want them to just know the parts of the brain. I want them to know how to use their brain so that when stuff happens, here's what you do.
Right. It's just information if you don't have a context to apply it to your actual life and make your life better.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're talking
Exactly.
about all these changes, and it's kind of mind blowing. You know, you've mentioned things like social media and, you know, screen time, and I mean, we haven't even mentioned things like climate change. I feel like I see a lot of hopelessness in kids today based on what's happening with our climate and what the predictions are if we don't start doing something. Are you seeing that? Are you hearing them talk about that?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, we got into really deep conversations about, you know, the rising water levels and the pollution and all of that, and you know, gender issues and questions around identity. Identity is a really big thing for adolescents and early 20-year-olds, and, you know, in their 20s. Identity, creating relationships. Those are the challenges that is kind of like in their age group. I mean, we all have different challenges depending on our kind of like our bracket of age. And so we're seeing that. I mean, they are coming into classrooms. I open up the forum and they're like, I don't know if you know, if we're, what kind of career do I go into? What's going to get automated and what isn't? And, you know, if I get a degree in this, am I going to be able to work in that? And, you know, in education being so expensive, these kids are struggling. And, you know, there's a psychological concept called agency. So feeling like you have agency, feeling like you have power to make a difference in your life. And there is this lack of a sense of agency with these kids. And they come into, and so as parents, as educators, as employers, you know, there is this kind of sense of powerlessness, this sense of, you know, well, if I do this, is it going to do anything? Is it going to be wasted effort?
That's the hopelessness part.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, you know, my daughter came home, she's going to be a senior and she's in journalism school at Arizona. And she came home and said, oh my God, like, is AI taking my job? Now, what am I going to do? Right. And so this is a girl who's been on track, you know, with school, getting good grades, doing everything she's supposed to. But it's a scary time, right?
It is.
Yeah, I love that term agency. I think we could probably, well, we are going to have a discussion around that with Donna Appadone about purpose. And I think without purpose, right, then everything starts to, all the wheels start to fall off the bus. And I think that's a big part of what's going on right now with our young males, right, especially having difficulty with that. So we're gonna have a whole nother series on that.
Yes, that is. I mean, it's like you can have a sense of purpose, but if you don't feel powerful in that, if you don't see how you can take your purpose and manifest it into a career, you know, it feels like hopelessness. And we talk, you know, and when we've done workshops with the kids and when we've done educational things with people who are, you know, have their, you know, the foot on the ground kind of people, when we talk about suicide, hopelessness is the key, you
Right.
know, and you
Exactly.
get to hopelessness, you know, depression comes first, this feeling of overwhelm, this feeling of, you know, I have all these passions and talents and dreams, and how do I, what's the route for those
Mhm.
things? How do
Mhm.
I get there from here?
Mhm. Marcy and I had thought about was, just this comes up over and over. We have older kids too, and the cost of housing. I mean, the apartment, a 1 bedroom apartment is more than most people pay for the houses, and somehow these
Yeah.
kids are expected to save their money,
Right.
right? To buy a house. Right? That seems ridiculous. Like, how would they
Yeah.
ever do such a thing, right?
Even
Right. Well,
renting is just,
yes.
yeah, it feels not possible. And whereas, we talked a little bit about this at one of the workshops, this idea of how has the world changed? What was the world like when we were finishing college? And, I remember getting when I was in college, we would get a summer job every year and contribute $1,000 towards our college costs. And that was a significant chunk of it. Like $1,000 was kind of our piece. It might be a third, it might be, it's probably a quarter or a third, but it was significant to where our parents could pull the rest. Like they can't do that now. Talk about some of those things that are so different then for us as young folks, like coming into the world, and for kids today.
Right. So there's a thing that I like to talk about every fall when I start class. There's this college, Benoit College, Benoit. I could be pronouncing it wrong. Maybe the T is silent. Either way, they do a mindset list every year, and it's really focuses on, okay, so these kids have this class coming in this year has always had this or has never had this. So if you imagine, like, they've always had access to ATMs, they've always had Google, you know, for as long as they've been around, you know, these things have been true. And like, you know, so if you think back to when we were in high school, I'm not gonna, you know, I don't care if I age myself. I was in the 80s. I don't care, whatever. In the 80s, I was in high school, and then you
Yeah.
graduate and you can get a group of friends and you could have gotten an apartment and had plenty of money. Like you could have
Yes.
Yeah.
worked, you know, a medium paying job. You could have worked at a restaurant and been a server,
Yes.
or, you know, you could have even worked retail or a bank or something. And you and a, you know, maybe a roommate got a place and you were okay.
Yep.
You could go on little vacations, you could afford to go out to dinner once in a while. It wasn't anything, you know, you weren't going to, you know, buy a yacht or anything, but that wasn't your
Right.
aspiration at 19 or 20, you know. So
Yeah.
you could have a life back then. So I really want to emphasize that we as parents, or you know, Gen X, the lost generation, many of us in that, that we have this idea that, well, you just pull yourself up from the bootstraps. My life was hard and I still managed. Well, no, yeah, your life was hard, but not hard in the way that it is now.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
we did not have COVID. We did not have the housing crash of 2008. These kids were young when that happened. You know,
Yeah.
we didn't have this recession that we have now, this lack of, like, your dollar doesn't get you far. I'm renting, you know, and me and my housemate, we're good, but we're not putting money away for, you know, a lot of retirement. You know,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
not going on extravagant trips. Life has gotten harder, and we have to really acknowledge that these kids' anxiety is
Yeah.
real. Really, we have to, because then we're not being fair to them, and we're being judgy, and that's not okay as parents, as instructors, as employers. You know, we can't. And people are like, well, nobody wants to work. Yeah, nobody wants to work for the salary that people are trying to pay people,
That's right.
because
That's
you
right.
can't afford to live on those salaries.
Right.
Right.
We could have back then, you know, we
Yeah.
could have, but we can't. These kids can't now. And there's a
Right.
lot of hopelessness out there, a lot of sadness. And then COVID was huge too.
I
You know?
Yeah.
remember, Yuli, when we were doing the live workshops at the college, and
Yeah.
we were having discussions about, being at the community college and the differences of the kids there. And you pointed out the fact your friend is a nurse at the college, that so many of these kids were actually living in their cars. right?
Mhm.
They would come to school to get their food. And that was mind-blowing to me, mind-blowing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I imagine since the pandemic, that has not gotten any better. And I think
It's
a lot
not.
of people don't realize that this is the situation for these kids trying to
Yeah.
trying to do their best right now and trying
Yeah.
to go to college, right?
Yeah. And
Right.
talk a
No.
little bit about that, Yuli, about how when you're in that situation, living in your car, you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You don't know how you're going to pay for college. How are you going to show up and access your education from that place of dysregulation and fight or flight? Talk a little bit about that and what's going on in their brains and their bodies in those moments.
Well, it's interesting because I teach at a somewhat affluent college. Okay, so the area that I teach in is kind of middle class, high middle class, and so
Mhm.
these kids are struggling. Kids that are coming to this college are struggling. So, when your brain is in that constant state of cortisol release, of stress response, constant. You're living in your car. How can you come to class and focus? That's another reason why. So, you have more and more kids dealing with being kind of on the neurodivergent autism spectrum. So they or ADD or ADHD or undiagnosed other learning issue.
Mhm.
So being really structured and really academic does not serve those students. Not that we are going to reduce or make things easier, but there's different routes to the same learning. And so engaging in conversation is what more and more of us are doing.
Mhm.
And really, and what's sad is as instructors, we're getting more involved in those little pieces of students' lives. Like I'll check in on a student, like, how are you doing today? I saw that your head was down. Well, I didn't get any sleep last night because, I got some chaos in my family, or, we might get kicked out of our apartment, we're moving, all these things. And so we have all these referral services and all these programs, but students can't always access those.
Yeah.
And it isn't always easy to kind of, piecemeal all these things and, well, go to here for this and go to that for that. And it's just overwhelming. And I feel it breaks my heart to see these kids who want to do better and feel that impact of life outside of them. Food. I mean, we have a food pantry on campus, and there is always someone needing something out of that. We have an equity center where students come who who are, students of color who are, along the, LGBTQ, have some aspect of that.
Mhm.
There's still a lot of bullying and a lot of darkness around that, and it breaks my heart,
Yeah.
Yeah.
honestly.
Well, obviously, especially in the LGBTQIA area, we're seeing these
Yes.
laws coming up. And, we're in California. We're very fortunate that, we're not, our legislature and our government isn't making laws to make it illegal to be transgender or to be LGBTQIA, showing up as your true self. But we know that's happening in other states. And I'm seeing online and on social media, people seeking guidance on, we got to get out of Florida right now. Like, where should
Yeah,
we go? And that's crazy.
it
That's
is.
incredible trauma that we're inflicting on families for political purposes, in my opinion. And
Yes.
yeah,
No,
it's
and here's the
taking a
thing, these
toll.
kids, we know we speak it, we know we live in California, but I've had conversations, because I speak openly about all issues in my classes. There's nothing we can't talk about. So my kids, my students, I call them my kids. My students know that I'm a
Your kid.
safe space. Yeah, they're my kids.
Yes.
They know that I'm a safe space, and so they'll come after class and they'll talk about those things, and they hear these things happening in other states, and they're pretty sure it won't happen in California,
Yeah.
but it still affects people because it's
Yes.
like, what's going on? Why do people hate people who look like me or act like me or present like I do so much? What difference does it make what I do or who I meet and to
Yeah.
anybody else? Why? There's
Yeah.
Yeah.
a lot of processing that I do with students around that. Because
Yeah.
even though it's not happening here in California, it's like somebody's doing that to somebody else
It
who's
still
just
affects
like
them.
them,
Yeah,
who's
it
just
still
like them.
affects them. And as you know,
Yes.
I have a transgender son. He's been making plans to move out of the country for years. And,
Yes.
in the beginning, my response was always, no, we stay and fight for our country. but trying to see it from his eyes as things have ratcheted up in a way I did not see coming. And I've
Oh, man.
studied authoritarianism and fascism and, in school. I didn't think it would happen here. And so to
No.
be in that place where you're seeing who you are become illegal, even if it's in another state, is still in our country, terrifying and traumatizing.
Yeah.
It is so devastating. And to hear young women speak about the invasion of their bodies and these, so because there is, I mean, that's kind of like, I have kids that come up to me who are LGBTQ. I'm very open about my own experience in those areas. But then it's the young women. I have 2 daughters, and to have daughters is hard to be a young woman. And then you add the layer of the LGBTQ experience, being a female, being, and all of that.
Right.
And then our men, our boys, our males, they're lost, they're lost too. Everybody is struggling, everybody in different ways and for different reasons. But it's like nobody knows how to talk to anybody anymore. It feels like.
Well, yeah,
honestly,
it's pure isolation. I mean, we've gotten to this very isolating place in the world. Yuli, I want to change the subject, not completely, because this applies to all of those groups of people that we're talking about. And for those of you listening, the 3 of us have done suicide training together. And for those LGBTQI and just, the world in general, I don't know if people know these statistics, but every 11 and a half minutes in the United States of America, someone will take their own life by suicide. So in the time that we're having this podcast, that's about 5 people, which is very sickening. And, we're doing these podcasts to have these difficult discussions around suicide. But Yuli, I want you to give us your perspective on suicide. You've done training in this area. You've taken those calls on the line, and I'd love for you to tell people about that a little bit.
Okay, so the statistics are staggering, like you said, every 11 and a half minutes. And if you think about 700,000 people at least attempt every year. Okay, so wrap your brain around that number. And I think that number is higher because an attempt isn't considered an attempt unless there's a note or the person says or whatever.
Right.
And there's a whole realm around passive suicide. It's a conversation. We could do a whole semester on the psychology around suicide, honestly. But some of the main pieces are around hopelessness, like I talked about earlier. Just this, if you feel like you have no hope, why would you stick around? I mean, you have thought of everything. You have tried in your mind what you perceive of everything that you can do, and you don't see this changing. There is a negative triad that people who are depressed experience. It is the sense of, the world sucks, I suck, and it will never change. So this idea that this pervasive sense of my life is horrible, I have no power, I have no ability to do anything different. And the piece of hopelessness is that it will never change. Why would you want to stick around? I mean, if that's just an honest to God perception, there's no arguing with someone who is suicidal, and don't you dare tell them, oh, it's going to be fine, just stick around, don't do it, you're lying. And that's just another door that's shut for them. I've been suicidal as much as I've worked with people. When I was in that place on the floor, glass of water in one hand, bottle of pills in the other, I had to talk myself out of it. And I used the things that I've learned to say to people to myself. And it's a hard road because you're on the floor, you're in those positions because you don't feel like you have this tunnel vision. There is this, nothing's going to change. Like I can't change my situation. I can't change where I live. I can't, I'm who I am. I'm what I look like. I am this person in this shell of a, in this body, and that's never going to change. So maybe I need to do a reset, right? And so it's very easy.
Yuli, as you're talking about that, traditionally we know that people don't want to talk about suicide. They don't want to say the word. They certainly don't want to ask people about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're having a shift around that and understanding that we do need to talk about it. But
Yes.
I think people are afraid because they don't know how. Can you give some guidance on if there is someone you're worried about, or if there's a situation that's, what that is in your gut when something's off? How can you show up in a place of support and helpfulness and talk about it? What are the best practices for that?
Okay. So here's the thing. If you see someone and you've been seeing them kind of going down a spiral, suicide potentiality, there's a window, there's a tunnel, there's a time where that person is at the highest risk. And so here's a couple things. So you need to be able to ask them, and don't beat around the bush. Don't say things like, hey, are you checking out tomorrow? It's like, be really clear when you ask the question. And here's some markers. So, some people who are suicidal will start to give their stuff away. Will start to say things like, I won't need this. I won't need this where I'm going. They're not moving, they're not moving. So they'll start to give things away. Sometimes people feel a little bit better because they've made a decision. Tuesday at 10, I'm going to take a bottle of pills. And so sometimes there's this little kind of upturn of like nothing's changed, but they feel a little bit better. And combining that with a feeling of hopelessness and giving their things away. But there's oftentimes, they talk about death. They talk about that. And so there are signs, and they are wanting you to ask. So here's what you do. You ask them. You are point blank going to ask, are you thinking of dying? Are you thinking of taking your life? Are you thinking of killing yourself? If you're a young person and you ask that question, it's good for you to have somebody on backup. Hey, like go to someone, ask an adult. Hey, I'm going to go ask Billy if he's suicidal. Can I call you if he says yes? Make sure that you're not doing this alone. If you're a young person, or even if you're an older person, it's good to have more than one person involved. And if they get mad at you for involving someone else, yeah, you know what? I don't care that you're mad at me. You can never speak to me again for the rest of your life, but at least you have a life to live, So that's okay if they get upset with you. Have a backup person, have someone you're bringing in. Ask the question. If they say yes, ask for the plan. Do you have a plan for dying, for killing yourself? Don't be vague. Use the words. The more you use the words, the more real it sounds. Because sometimes people get this kind of like, well, they're going to see how they hurt me when I'm gone. And so there's kind of this romanticism or whatever around that suicide.
Right.
So like use the words. Hey, so how are you going to, what do you have a plan for taking your life, for killing yourself? Do you have a plan? If they have a gun, you don't go. You don't engage. You call the authorities. You don't want to be part of a murder suicide scenario. You don't go if they have a gun. But if they have pills, if they have rope, razor blades, whatever they have, ask them for it. They will give it to you. People who drop hints want to be stopped. They don't want to die, because here's the thing. It's not about death. It's about solving the problem. It's about relief from the pain. Death isn't the goal. Relief is the goal. They will give you whatever they have. You'll be surprised how quickly they will hand things over. They will just hand things over, and don't leave them alone. Stay with them. Hear the story again, and keep on saying things like, you don't want to die. This is the cliche response. This is the permanent solution to a temporary problem. Do not ever promise things are going to get better, because you don't know. You don't know. Yes. But if you die today, you won't find out. If you die today, you won't find out. And that's what I told myself. If I die today, I don't know what my life is going to have. I don't know. And there was a little voice in my head that kind of, like in the background, like, you're not done. I mean, that was kind of a little bit of what got me to still be here, is, you're not done. And so you're not done. You can say, like, because one of the things that's true about people who are suicidal or depressed is they really do have an accurate perception of what's going on.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's the whole stigma piece around it, right? And especially as I was growing up, like if you ever heard about that, you just didn't talk about it. If it was in someone's family, you don't talk about
Yeah.
it. But it was interesting. Marci and I worked a workshop recently locally, and there was a counselor who was there, and we had a large group of kids there, and he just had them say the word suicide out loud 3 times, like really, really loud. I want you to say it. I want you to say it again. I want you to say it again. And so I think if we all work to pull
That's
the
powerful.
stigma out of the word, then this fear goes away, right? It's just a conversation. And then there's nothing to hide, right? The generations of loss around suicide, like it's a generational thing, right? So
It is, and it used to be that if you attempted suicide, you were charged with a crime.
yes.
That was a
Right.
thing. And I would have callers, on the line, like, do you think I go to hell if I die from suicide? Like, will my soul be in eternal damnation? Like it's like there's this, there's all this stuff around that. So it makes it really hard to talk about. But yeah, I love what that counselor did. We need to be able to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because I would have like my cousins. I mean, I come from a big Greek family. My big fat Greek wedding is my family. They don't want to admit it, but it's true. So I would have my cousins call me and say, "Hey, that thing you do? Like, what? I do lots of things. What thing are you talking about? Where you on the phone?" I'm like, at this point, I kind of knew, but I wanted them to say it. It's like, what do you mean that thing I do on the phone? I talk on the phone a lot. In Berkeley when you go, it's like, what? Tell me, say it. What do you want?
Yeah.
Three
And
of my cousins. 3.
Wow.
Yeah. And one was in the hospital, and the story was that she went in for her appendix.
yeah. So that whole idea about not being able to talk about it, and the language has changed in recent years too. Can you talk a little bit about that? The way we've trying to destigmatize the language and the act.
Well, we want to destigmatize. We want to change the language. One of the things I try to, and I more often than not able to these days, but I don't talk about committing suicide because it sounds like you did something great, So I talk about people dying from suicide, attempting suicide is one. I mean, you're trying that, but I don't say commit. I say die from suicide or considering suicide, or just, self-inflicted death, self-harm, things like that. I don't talk about it as committing suicide because it's not something, and then I've heard people say, a successful suicide. Really, is that how we want to talk about it? We want to, give people a high five. You successfully what? We don't use those words anymore. Words are powerful.
Committed sounds like a crime.
It does sound like a crime.
And it does.
Or you're committed to something.
Right.
So we talk about, and it's more realistic to say dying of suicide because that's what happens. When we say dying of suicide, death is the result.
Right. I feel like this could be a good moment to just briefly remind people that if you are in that place of crisis, if you're thinking about harming yourself, or if there's someone that you need helping, you can now text 988 to get help, get access to the National Suicide Support Line and get some help. As Yuli was saying, don't try to do that alone unless you've had the training. And even then, we're here to support each other. We got to reach out. We got to help each other. And sometimes we need professional help. So, if it's on your mind, like that's why they're there. They're there to talk to you. And even if it's just something that's plaguing you, that's a little voice in the back of your head, call a professional and talk to them and let them help you. Let somebody help you to come back to more of yourself and to feeling better.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that's the next step. So and 988 is great because they're not just there for the suicidal person. Truly, they are there. If you're a family member or you have a friend and you're not sure, they are there also as a resource for you, because it is a hard thing to carry that, to wonder, to be scared. So when you have that person and you've taken the item away, and you stay with them, then the next step is to help them find some care, some assistance, some support. You
Mhm.
can't do that. You are not trained. Like Marci just said, help them find that support. Don't just walk away and go, oh, well, they're fine. I took their stuff away. You can get
Yeah.
razor blades. You can hoard pills. There is,
Yeah.
these things are available and possible. And just because you were there for a couple days doesn't mean that that person is out of the woods. It's important that you support if they need a ride, if they need someone to kind of, sit in the waiting room while they go talk to a therapist. Do what
Right.
you can. I mean, you've got to draw your own boundaries and take care of yourself,
Yes. Yes.
as well. So there's that important self-care. But if you can be a support to this individual, if you can, like, we'll go with them when they go to therapy, and then maybe, be there when they come out and be a support and take them home, because maybe they're too rattled to drive after they've talked to someone about some of the gut-wrenching things that led to that potential attempt.
Yeah.
Be there,
Yeah.
to the best of your ability, and engage in self-care for you.
Sometimes that's half the battle, just showing up and letting someone
Yes.
know, like you can say, I don't know what to say right now, but I love
Okay.
you and I am here. And let's
Yes.
call someone who does know what to say, and let's get
Right.
some help. Let's do this
Yeah.
together, but you're not alone.
Yes. Because loneliness is huge. That's another thing these young people are struggling with.
Yeah.
We see all
Yeah.
these kids with friends on social media, but they're not people you can call at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Let's be honest, they're not. And
Right.
so
Right.
loneliness is a huge aspect of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
There's a new I forget what it's called, socio-emotional theory around suicide. And there are three major pieces to it, the three warning signs. And these are, just real quick, a sense of being a burden, feeling like you're a burden to people,
Mm,
feeling like people are tired. And people may not have said these things. These are your own feelings of a burdensomeness
right.
that you feel. A lack of capacity of connection. So this kind of thwarted sense of belongingness, not feeling like you have your clique, your group, your people,
Yeah.
feeling like there's no one you can connect with. And then the third piece is the capacity for self-harm. And so
Mhm.
you add those three, and the more of that you experience and have, the more likely you are to then feel like suicide is the answer.
Yeah.
So, and those are things for parents to kind of keep an eye on too. It's like, does your kid talk about feeling like a burden? Does your kid belong to clubs? More and more schools are creating these clubs and having ways for kids to engage with like-minded kids, like the theater
Yeah.
kids, or the chess kids, or however,
Yes.
the robotics programs, things like that are ways for you to find your
And
people.
see yourself and others, and not feel so alone.
Right. Right.
Hey,
Mhm.
can we take a moment and just take a breath together? Because this is some heavy conversation. And for anyone
Mhm.
who's listening, I just think it's important to have the conversation, but it is important to take care of yourself. So
Yes.
maybe let's all just receive a breath in and just feel that calming sense while we have these really tough conversations.
They are. And I tell you, I'm going through my own stuff right now, and grounding, like, we've talked about, grounding has been so, like, I
Yeah.
live, we have turkeys and we have trees and there's a creek by my house. I love just going outside and just even for a few minutes,
Talk about that. And so, we've kind of delved into this, what's going on, but let's talk about some of these tools and how they actually are affecting the body and the mind and the limbic system, the whole thing. Talk a little bit about that and how it can lift us back up and bring us back to center.
So, our brain is plastic. We use the word plasticity, and it's not made of plastic, but what plasticity means is that our brain is resilient. It is wired to respond to our environment. So, as we're born, we have genetics, and so, it doesn't mean that our brain is always this way. And so the limbic system is part of the kind of the older brain, I don't know, I don't call it reptilian or whatever, the older structures of the brain.
Yeah.
And so the limbic system is your emotional aspect, your part of your brain that manages emotions, memories, and also like your routines, your your sleep and eating. And that's why people who are depressed sometimes have issues around sleep and food and things like that, because it's all part of the same structure. But there's this little piece, this little part, and there's a lot of research being done on the amygdala. And we have two of them. They look like little almonds. But what they do is they are responsive to stress. It's the amygdala's job so the amygdala and the hippocampus, these are parts of the limbic system. The hippocampus's job is to transfer things to long-term memory. And the amygdala and the hippocampus work together. And this is where our panic and anxiety sets in. Mm-hmm. So our brain is wired for survival. That's what its job is, survival. And the amygdala's job is to be reactive, to be responsive to memory. And so what happens oftentimes when we are constantly in this state of stress, the amygdala is always firing, and it changes the structure of the amygdala. It is not a healthy structure. It gets inflamed, it gets really reactive. And what it does is it responds to intense emotion. And then what it does is it signals the hippocampus to create a memory around it. Mm-hmm. And this is why we get so worked up. This is why we have triggers. This is the origin of our triggers. Okay. Yes. So it is where this marriage between the amygdala and the hippocampus, it's like, this happened, here's a strong emotion. Don't forget this, because the next time we may not survive. And it has nothing to do.
We get stuck in these loops, right? And
we do. Exactly.
And over. Yes.
And it's supposed to help us, like if we're in the wild and there's actually like a black bear coming at us. Mm-hmm. But that black bear could be a parent. It could be a situation. It could be, something, a bullying, things like that.
A test, an uncomfortable conversation.
Oh my God.
Learning to drive, all of these life things. Yeah.
All of these things. It could be anything. It could be a social situation. Imagine asking someone on a date. Oh my God. So talking to people, engaging in conversation, not feeling comfortable doing a job interview, taking a test, whatever it is that feels like a threat. What happens is these two systems work together to create a powerful memory that then is easily triggered when something kind of sort of maybe possibly like it shows up. If it smells like a duck, it may not be a duck, but it's close enough. It's close enough. So it's we're going to get fired up. And the panic. So we talk about panic disorder and panic attacks. A lot of kids have. We don't even remember, because when people have panic attacks, you can have an anxiety and a trigger and know your triggers, but panic attacks are a totally different animal, because a person can get triggered into a panic attack and not know why. Yeah. So there is a background memory, something in our consciousness that we're not even aware of, but our amygdala and our hippocampus, at some level, these things are, or our stress system then goes into this spin. And so so here's what we need to do. Avoidance.
We have tools.
We have tools.
Yes.
So
on a happy note.
Yes, we have tools. So here's where I'm going to go with our tools.
Okay.
Avoidance feeds anxiety. So if you don't take a test, if you don't talk to people, you're constantly going to be feeding that anxiety. Yeah. So my invitation to you is go in and take that test. Start talking to someone. Yeah. Put your resume out and go on that job interview. But before you do, check out our tools.
Yes.
Before you do,
take a breath.
Find a way to take a breath. I'll tell you that grounding, I've been in grading mode. I'm so glad to be doing this with you guys, because I've been in grading mode and answering emails and preparing for next semester, because I'm teaching a summer class. But I go outside. And I'm telling you, I have turkeys out here. I want to buy this house, by the way. I'm so excited. There's turkeys out here. There's, and the sun comes up just right in the morning and hits my front yard. And I will go out there, I swear, and I will just put my feet, and my neighbors might think I'm weird. I go out there in my pajamas and I put my feet in the ground and I put my arms out. And I just let the sun hit me just right, because it comes through the trees. And I feel that connection to like the gravity and the connection to the, it sounds weird, but I feel the minerals in the ground. I feel, I know.
We're
and
all
I'm
in.
our
That's
listeners,
powerful.
I'm hoping are
Yes.
getting this, because I feel it. I feel like I just feel like really connected and
Yes.
feeling really supported, and feeling that support from our planet, from the ground,
Yes.
helps me with my day. I will tap. I know we have tapping. I will sit there and I will tap my little heart out when things get stressed out.
There
You
is
know, I will.
scientific basis for all of
There
these
is.
things. And
There
so
is.
take it from the
The way
psych
the
professor.
Yes,
Yes.
oh no, we do. And I show my students these things. Meditation, tons of research on powerful, on like super meditators. I mean, there's
Yeah.
tons of research on what the brain does. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm going to get on a little soapbox, so just bear with me. Medication only takes care of symptoms. That's all it does. You stop the medication, your symptoms come back, and sometimes even more. So what we know is therapy, processing, journaling. Journaling is another thing I do. I'm writing a book, by the way, so there's that. You know, but journaling, writing things down, getting things out of your brain. We know that there's a part of the brain that is very active with negative emotion, very active with negative emotion. Medication doesn't do any of it, but cognitive behavioral therapy, talking things out, journaling,
Right.
finding ways to meditate. What we know, within 6 months of doing any of these super helpful activities, within 6 months, that brain structure changes. We see more activity in the part of the brain that experiences positive emotion, and less in the part of the brain that fires for negative emotion. We see increases in capacity for focus. We see improvement in sleep patterns. We see all these things as a result of engaging in these activities, because our brain is plastic. You get to heal your brain, and you get to be, and then that's the piece of agency that comes into that too, because you did that. You took action, you
Yes.
journaled, you
Yes.
took care of yourself, you engaged in, tapping, you went and got yourself grounded, you went out in nature, you did that. And if you can do
That's
that,
our whole
what else
thing.
can you do?
That's our whole
What
thing, is
else?
to empower people
Yes,
to take
that's
action
right.
on their own.
That's it.
That's perfect.
That's it.
That's perfect,
Yes.
Yuli.
Oh my goodness, Yuli, like we're gonna have you back like 3 or 4 more times.
Clearly.
Is we could
You
go
got
on
it.
for days, and we're probably at least 10 minutes over time, but there was so much information, and we love you. You are the warrior of all warrior people and parents, and we could have never done any of this without you. And
I feel blessed to be part of this group, and I wish I could be more involved, but
super grateful for you. Yeah.
so much going on.
Yeah.
But we're all doing amazing things, and we come to that from a feeling of agency. So this is
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yuli.
All right, you guys take care. I look
Okay,
forward
you
to doing
too.
this again.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
And now for a moment about meditation and how it can help you and your family to self-regulate and mindfully return to a place of calm and centeredness. Our Core Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm, in spite of whatever's going on in your world. Meditation is just one of these powerful tools, and through a special partnership with Donna Appadone, we have created a very special group of meditations available only on our platform and via Donna's own website. Donna Appadone describes them as brief, vibrant motivators to keep you focused on your purpose. Let's listen to a few seconds from this week's meditation, and then Donna will tell you more about it. Here's Donna Appadone.
My load is never so heavy that I cannot help you with yours. I'm never too busy to see you. I'm never too deaf to listen to what you need. Hi, I'm Donna Appadone, and I'm the person who writes and records meditations for Core Experience. We just heard the first few lines of this week's meditation. I want to tell you a little bit more about it. We're never alone. Even when it feels like we're alone, We're not. We're all connected to each other in a strange sort of way. And there is scientific evidence that when we do something good for someone else, it comes back to help us and benefits us. That's what this meditation communicates. When we stand outside ourselves and do something good for someone else, we are enriched. We feel our purpose in life. And the thing about this is it doesn't have to be a big gesture, even something small. Anything that you do for someone else helps them and comes back to you in a good way. Help someone else and lift your own spirit. Whatever is going on with you right now, remember, you can do anything you set your heart to do. When we cannot see each other, we can see each other in ourselves. I see you. I hear you. We are never alone.
Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast. You can find us at coreexperience.org, and that's core spelled C-O-U-R. Next week, we'll be talking to Vashti Somerville of Family Healing Connections about interacting with our kids and creating healthy family dynamics and systems that support us all.
Our meditation segment is produced by Donna Appadone with music from Scott Holmes. A full collection of meditations in Donna's book, Drive Time Meditations, is available on Amazon and at donnaappadone.com. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast, and also the technical and marketing team, support from She Reigns Creative and Inspire Your Brand. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. The Warrior Parent Podcast is a production of Core Experience.